Hi guys, and this is Praveen. In this video, let's talk about the most common basic internet stuff, that is TCP and HTTP, and what is the difference. So we all know that HTTP is also TCP and TCP also HTTP, and a lot of confusions were uh, happening, including me. So even myself recently searched like what is actually TCP and what is HTTP. So this is just a video log on what I found on the internet, and I'm just going to share it with you. So first things first. So HTTP is actually built on top of TCP. So we will have an analogy to understand better. Um, okay, and before that we also need to remember two words or two concepts like sequence number. One is sequence number, and there's one more. What is that? Um, Sequence number and control flow. Yeah. So there is a major difference here when talking about control flow and sequence number. So so to operate, HTTP needs to run on top of TCP. So TCP is actually transfer control protocol, and HTTP is hypertext transfer protocol. We don't have to talk about HTTPS because it is also HTTP with a certificate. So that is the traffic is basically secured. So let's just talk about HTTP and TCP. So okay, let's assume that there are two computers that want to talk to each other. That is a client server. A client wants to communicate with the server and get a response back. So initially, this is how the communication is going to happen. Whenever you are going to type www.google.com in your browser, um, basically it's the browser is going to send a request, right? So before sending the request, the server has to know who you are basically. So when we met a person, or when we are going to meet a person, usually we will do handshakes and introduce ourselves. So that is how this is also going to happen. Like our browser or our local system is going to send a handshake. So they call it as three-way handshake. So initially our browser is going to send a SYN packet, that is SYN, and the server on the other side receives a SYN packet and send a SYNAC packet, SYN hyphen ACK packet, to the server, to the client. Um, the client acknowledges basically, so ACK is basically acknowledge packet. The client keeps the SYN packet and sends back the ACK packet back to the server. So now the server knows who you are, and the client also knows, or we know who we are going to connect to, that is Google in this case. And the process of this handshake happens in TCP protocol, not in HTTP. So TCP knows how to do the handshake, right? So think of it as you are talking to your neighbor, and you want to establish a communication between yourself and your neighbor in your home. So imagine like you are taking a big pipeline and insert it into your neighbor's home, just for the analogy. So using that pipe, you are going to communicate from your home to your neighbor home, and you can also exchange data from your home to your neighbor home. So the process of establishing this pipeline is called the handshake, and it is done by TCP. And once the pipeline installment is done, that is actual handshake is done, uh, what you're going to do is you need to the next step is actually going to send the data, right? You need to send the data from your home to your neighbor home. So that is done through HTTP. So HTTP is going to send the data through that pipeline that is established by TCP. And remember here, like the next consequent request doesn't need to establish a connection every time. The handshake is not going to happen because it is already done, right? And using that pipeline, basically we are going to send the data through HTTP. Like imagine there is a pipeline which is already established, and you want to send something from your home, let's say a small ball. So that is data from your home to your neighbor's home. You can always roll it from through that pipeline, and the neighbor at the other end will receive the ball. And if he wants, he can also send something from his end, that is actually server. Neighbor is actually server in this case, and he can roll it into our home, and we will receive a different ball. So that is establishing data. Now, now we learned like how TCP helps us to establish, the handshake and then the communication pipeline initially, and then HTTP to send the data. Now, we want to terminate the data. I mean, terminate the connection once the uh, data flow is already done, or it is finished. We want to establish. Sorry. Okay. Now we want to terminate the connection, since the data exchange is already done. There are two ways to do it. One, formally closing the connection, and two, informally closing the connection. Which means, let's talk about the same analogy, establishing a pipeline between your home and neighbor. So the data exchange is done. So you can tell your neighbor, and that the data transfer is done, and you can pull your pipeline out, so that you know neighbor will also know that the connection is gone. I will do some other task, some other work that he already has. In same fashion, um, the browser is basically responsible for sending a termination, a packet, which is called as fin. That is finish. So remember, we already spoke about SYN packet, SYNAC packet, and ACK packet, right? Um, and the fourth final handshake is basically fin, which is the client is sending a fin packet to the server, telling the server that the connection is already. I don't need the connection anymore. If I want, I can establish a connection once again. Right. So when talking about this analogy, you can either nicely tell your neighbor that I don't need this connection anymore. You can pull the pipeline, or else you can just leave it as it is, and then you just leave your home and carry on with your work. But the pipeline is still there. So the neighbor will wait for some time that you are going to send some data. That is, you are going to roll out some ball. If he waits for let's say like 2 or 3 minutes, and then you are not going to send a ball, the neighbor gets angry and he closes the connection on his end, on the client end. Um, in similar fashion, it also happens in the server. If you don't, or if your browser don't send a fin packet after the data transfer for some time, uh, the server abruptly close the connection. Um, so usually that shouldn't be happening when you are developing your own application. You should take care of closing the connection, but usually it is done by the browser. When you actually close the browser will send a fin packet. So it is the responsibility of the browser. So on a high level, this is the difference between HTTP and TCP. Uh, I hope it helped you learn a bit, and happy exploring. Thank you.